Hey guys, welcome back to Powerstroke Boys. Today we're back out in the garage. We got a customer's vehicle in we're working on. It's a 2023 Chevy Duramax 1500. I believe this is the small Duramax, the 3.0, if I'm not mistaken. This customer wants a set of airlift bags, just like my 7.3 Powerstroke has. He does a lot of towing with this. He has a nice fishing boat, and he's tired of the sag, especially when you guys put a bunch of cargo, the boat, and then the whole weight of the truck. This thing likes to drag its rear legs. You guys can see we have nothing here on the truck currently, just factory leaf springs and factory bump stops. We went ahead and put together a kit for the customer. This is the airlift series bags. These are the exact same ones I have in my truck. Obviously it's just a different set of brackets, things like that, but we went ahead and went with the Ultimate Edition. Exact same style bag that I have in my F-250. I highly recommend you guys go with the Ultimate, not the standard. These have internal joist bouncers or internal bump stops, if you really want to call it that. And what that does, let's say you don't have any air in the compressor, your compressor takes a crap, or you guys are aired up and you guys are still keeping these bags pretty saggy. This little joist bouncer here, or this little bump stop, if you will actually help prevent that bag from fully collapsing. We went ahead and also got some 14.4 conductor wire. I believe this is what, 30 feet. Yeah, we have 30 feet, and then we have 30 foot of extra 1/4 inch airline, and then we have our compressor kit here. I will leave links if you guys are interested in the video description below. It's not affiliated links. I don't make any money off of it. So if you guys want, check the video description below. Here is the whole airlift kit laid out. We have our 4 airbag buckets. We have our 14.4 wire, which is actually really nice quality. Like, I know it's all made in China, but that's actually a really nice harness. And you have your different colors, which makes it easy. 14 gauge is plenty enough for this little compressor. We have our airline kit. This is if you guys want to mount it to the back of the truck and fill it via like a small little portable Milwaukee air compressor, a hand pump, something like that. Now watch when I compress this bag, you guys will see how it doesn't flatten out all the way like a pancake. That's that internal bump stop doing its thing. Same thing with the other one here. You guys have your mounting kits, your stainless steel push connects, then you guys have your hardware kit for the bags. Nice powder coated brackets. It was kind of packaged crappy, I'm not gonna lie. Mine wasn't this bad, but these brackets are all scratched up and whatnot. I guess that's all right, but one of those things where just needs to be notated. So looks like we have our bottom plates here. I'm gonna assume this is the bottom because this will probably go over the leaf spring, or I could have this backwards, excuse me. These look like our top plates maybe, and then these look like they grab the frame on top of the bump stop, that little bracket that's welded to the frame rail, and then we have our U-bolt kit, then we have our instructions. All right, you guys, so here's our compressor kit. We got this from Max Speeding Rods on Amazon. Upon first inspection, looks like a pretty nice kit. They have a nice little placard card here with their information, then the installation. We have some wire, which looks like 18 gauge, might be 20. We're not gonna use that. You get your airline. We're not gonna be using that either. Then you have some ground wire, not gonna be worrying about that. The logo is kind of cool. It's like an embedded, embroidered sticker there. That's kind of cool. And here's your extra control kit. This is gonna get mounted up underneath the driver's side footwell. Nice gauge, nice sounding switch, drain. Essentially the exact same thing as mine. In the back here, you guys have the little bulb if you guys want to wire that up, which we will. And then here we have our fitting, our supply. So that's essentially that. Looking at the compressor, obviously it's made of ABS plastic. Looks identical, just a little bit fatter than my airlift compressor that I installed. We have our outlet, then we have our positive and negative. This is a very simple design. We have a ground, and then we'll have one fused power wire coming in, then another wire going straight to the compressor. And this is a on-demand, so you pump it up on demand as you need. It's not like a reserve with a tank. You have your installation kit, then you guys have all your hardware. Comes with your splitters, some zip ties, a nice little tubing cutter. That's pretty nice. And some self-tapping screws. So yeah, for being a little kit made in China, doesn't seem to be too bad of quality. This is the passenger side frame rail. We have plenty of room. I have assumed this is the best position where I'm going to mount it for this particular application. And it needs to be serviced. It's very easy to come in here and change because you guys know how China products are. And this will keep it up above the bottom of the frame rail, so our customer can do all the Dukes of Hazzard shit he wants We use the self-tapping screws. We'll come back and paint the frame. And I might even use some rib nuts in here, but self-tappers will work just as fine. And then we'll keep a nice airline, and then we can come across the frame rail down with the wiring. And plus the battery is up on the passenger side fender anyway, so that'll keep the wiring a straight shot up. And then we'll cut back over into the cab. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and use the stainless steel self-tapping screws that are provided in the kit. They're here, it's paid for, might as well. And they also have little rubber grommets to keep the compressor from vibrating loose. And again, they're stainless, so they're not going to rust. We don't have to worry about it causing a hole in the frame 30 years from now if this truck's even still on the road in 30 years, who knows. So I'm gonna go ahead and use that. You guys could use some rib nuts, like you guys see me use before, like in my custom PCV reroute on my truck for the hold the catch cam. That's an option as well, but it's really just unnecessary. It's just a simple little air compressor kit that'll probably get forgotten about. As long as it works, that's all that matters. Heat gun, and we have a nice heavy duty eyelet. Went ahead and cut off probably about 3 inches of the negative side because we don't need that much cable. We're going to go ahead and just ground it to the actual mounting bolt. And then obviously all these wires will get loomed, so that'll just attach right there with one of the self-tapping screws, which will be a nice short lead. And then obviously this one, we'll go ahead and we'll put all this on connectors. It comes with a couple spade connectors like these here, but I'm not crazy about these. I feel these are just cheap, and in a pinch they work, and you guys can see there's a slack I'd cut off. All right, you guys, we're inside the customer's truck here. We went ahead and agreed on a position for the gauge right down there. This truck is kind of disgusting. Anyways, we went ahead, mounted it down there. We only needed one self-tapping screw. I've got it wedged in there. I didn't want to drill any holes, but there's just nothing to bolt to down there. All right, I have all the plastics off the passenger side footwell. I guess we're going to run the wires up for the compressor in here. We're going to run the wires from the controller up behind here, behind the carpet, and we're going to tap into a switch 12-volt fuse in here on the passenger side fuse panel. The good thing about these newer vehicles is it's not like the old days where like Ford, Dodge, GM, Chrysler, all the fuse panels were either up underneath the passenger footwell, driver footwell, or over there in that corner. And then now they actually put 3 of them in this particular 23. There's one on that side, one on this side, there's one inside the engine bay, so you can pull power from literally anywhere. So I'm going to come in here with my test light. I'm going to ground it out here to the door jamb. I'm going to find which one's on a switched ignition. Then we're going to go ahead and attach our gauge wire into the power wire feeding to the controller. Then the other wire coming to the controller will go down to our nice harness, and it'll go to the compressor bar. And it's this one right back here at the tip of my finger, in front of this 50 amp, this 10 amp right there. This guy. This one right there. So you can see the one next to it is hot. And then we go ahead and try that one. It's dead. Okay, let's go ahead, hit the ignition, and we'll go ahead and we'll test that one, as you guys can see. All right, now we go ahead, turn the ignition off, and we'll go back to that same pin. Okay, nothing. Again, the one next to it has power, and that one is F26. And when we equivalent that to the diagram here, F26 is USB charge, okay, which is perfect. Now, the thing is, when you guys are tackling little projects like this in newer vehicles, older vehicles, a little tip for you: tag onto a circuit that obviously is 12-volt switched ignition if that's what you need for that particular application, number one. Number two, tap into a circuit that is a non-priority circuit. What I mean by that is you don't need to have a USB charger in the middle of a rainstorm or while pumping up your airbags. If that fuse was to blow, the worst case scenario was this USB port here. It's probably for the one in the back. They're probably conjoined together. I'm not quite sure. Worst case scenario, if that fuse was to blow or to pop, you would lose USB. And that's all it is. Again, go and look in here. USB charge just to charge your phone. So worst case scenario, you come over here, pop a new fuse in, you're good to go. Now that's a switched ignition, meaning the truck has to be running or the ignition has to be on for you to pump the airbags up. Now my truck obviously is wired a little bit different. The bags are on a constant 12 volts. And I have talked to the customer. I'd explain them the situation of how mine are wired up, and they want it just like mine. So we're going to give the customer what they want. I'm going to be using this 12 volt switched ignition circuit for the USB charge to turn on the gauge light down inside the actual controller. Yes, there's a bulb down in there, so when that kicks on, that light bulb will be on, and when the truck kicks off, it'll be off. Now you're probably thinking, why don't you tap into the headlight circuit? Well, you guys can see it's bright as day out here, and it's kind of dark to see that. And really, it doesn't matter. Mine stays on during the day. Obviously, in the shadows, my windows are tinted, and having that extra bulb inside that gauge makes it very, very helpful to see. So the kit comes with a couple different style fuse taps, which are these little silver pieces, or these little brass guys here. You have some different ones for different variation size fuses, different make and models. We're going to be going ahead and using this long one, or like this back scratcher looking style. Okay, and that's that fuse, and it orientates like that. We're going to go ahead and use that middle circuit. So all we have to do is take our little fuse tap, slide it in a leg of the actual fuse. It sits down flush, and then that will get put back in there. And this will be for the light. And then we'll use another one to go off a constant 12 volt hot, and that'll be so the bags can have power all the time. And they're not going to be drawing power. It's not going to have a parasitic draw because the bags are going to be on a switch, and that switch is not going to allow power through it unless you complete the circuit of that switch to feed the compressor power. All right, you guys, we have our 12 volt switch ignition probe in here. All right, so we have our tap there. Now we're going to go ahead and tap into fuse number 22 up here in the corner. Heated wheel, which means heated steering wheel. Again, constant 12 volt. It's a 7.5 amp. Those don't draw much power, so we're gonna go ahead, tap into that. All right, you guys, we have our fuse tap in here. We use that second little style, and then we have this last one left, which we're not going to use. Looks like a little spatula. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this one, and that'll go right back into its home. And there we go. All right, you guys, we're making good progress. We're about 90% done with the wiring. I went ahead and drilled a hole, put a grommet, as you guys can see. And I did use some paint to go and touch the bare metal up. Don't worry, it's double grommeted. There's one on the bottom and then one on the top here, so no water is getting in whatsoever. I could not find a grommet anywhere in this truck, and I did not want to drill any holes, but one hole is not going to kill anybody. And when you do it professionally and clean like this, it's fine. So we have both harnesses coming up, zip tied along each other and running all the way down to the driver's side footwell. And then I have my switched ignition and my constant 12 volt ran up here to the fuse panel where we're going to go ahead and tap. As you guys saw earlier, we have our tap fingers in there. We got the controller mounted. I got everything zip tied up underneath. And as far as the wiring, that'll get done tonight. And then tomorrow we'll have the airbags installed. All right, you guys, one thing I love about airlift products, they actually give you colored instructions in English. Not English, but English, okay? Tells you how to elevate the vehicle. First step, you guys need to go ahead and open your big hardware bag with the U-bolts and everything. Grab these two 50 millimeter long black bolts. Grab two of the small stainless steel washers you have. And you guys will grab two of the black spacers you guys have. And we have to use them to space out to attach to the brake line bracket. And also, while we're down there, we're going to go ahead and use a 10 millimeter deep socket to remove the joints bouncers, aka bump stops. So we're gonna go ahead and do these two steps together. All right, you guys, come up underneath the vehicle. You have your spare tire. I'm gonna leave it on for now. Come over here to the driver's side rear, and you guys can see there's our bracket right in front of the rear shock. Up here with those two 13 millimeter bolts, we need to go ahead and undo that with a 13 millimeter. And then those black spacers will go between the back of this bracket and this face of this frame. The black bolt, the stainless steel washer, your spacer, and this is how it will look. Up here, you have your black bolt, washer, spacer, frame. Do the same thing for this back one as well. All right, you guys, so to get these bump stops out, what I did was I used a 1/4 inch ratchet. I used a 1 inch extension with a deep 10 millimeter socket, and that fits in there perfectly and hangs down low enough so you guys can get it out. All right, you guys, next step, next page, if you guys have the AT4/Trail Boss, we need to remove that spacer. Basically, that looks like a extended bump stop. I'm assuming because those trucks are probably the off-road package, which essentially they are, which means they sit a little bit higher. So let's see, this one does not have the spacers. It looks like we just have the normal U-bolts and then the spring perch there on the leaf spring on the axle, and I don't see anything above. And this is not anything fancy. This is just a bare bones elevation package, and those bump stops, those spacers would sit right on top of here, so we don't have to take any of that off. So right, we went ahead and verified this is not an AT4 / Trail Boss edition. It has the extended bump stops. We don't have to remove that spacer. When you go ahead and use a T40 to remove the wiring harness guards on both the front of the axle, pry out the harness, retainers, and the guards on both sides. Set the screws and guards aside to be installed later. All right, you guys, here's the front of the axle. You guys can see we have this guard here on both sides. And talking about these bolts here, the T40, there's one there, and there's another one on that side that holds it. And then we need to pry out all the wiring to get this out of the way. All right, you guys, there's gonna be 2 Torques. Gonna have one here behind the gas tank and the driver's side rear of the axle. You'll have another one over here, and you guys will have one more up here on top of the axle too, all right? Then coming over here to the passenger side, one here, one there, and then another one way over here. And you guys are gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clips, and then those brackets will come off just like that. All right, you guys, the next thing we have to do is remove the brake line bracket attached to the axle under the leaf spring on both sides. Attach the brake line tabs, which are these 2 guys here. Use the previously removed factory hardware, tighten securely on both sides of the vehicle. Attach the brake line bracket tab using the M8, the 2 little smaller black bolts with the 2 last stainless steel washers we have. On both sides of the vehicle, torque to 16 foot-pounds. So essentially all we're doing, it looks like, is putting a tab here to attach something to the brake line. Maybe the guards get moved down. I'm not quite sure there. I'm sure we'll figure it out. Or maybe it's for another attachment point for the next step. All right, you guys, so these little tabs are essentially just brake line bracket relocation tabs. They're just gonna move it down so we can get the other brackets here for the actual airbags. So basically they're essentially just going to drop the brake line down like that. Then we're gonna go ahead and use the stock bolt on the top, and then we'll use a black bolt on the bottom. All right, you guys, so here it is. The extension is on. As you guys can see, I went ahead and I flipped the nut and the bolt around. It's much easier to get the nut on from the front side instead of trying to get your big fat fingers in here like me. So it doesn't matter. They're tight on both sides. Same thing on this side. I went ahead and I bent the bracket up a little bit to finagle them off the actual axle tubes, the housing, or the actual axle tubes. I don't want them touching, so I went ahead and I messed with those a little bit. Let's go ahead and go to the next step. All right, next step, position the forward clamp bracket C onto the front of the axle. So this is your C brackets. Would be nice if they were stamped. So that's what your 2C axle brackets look like. Looks like you come in on an angle and then you come up and wedge it, as you guys can see there. All right, you guys, the instructions are kind of dark picture-wise. You guys can go to the last cut and reference it, but it's basically saying you take this bracket and you position it on the front of the axle like that, essentially, which does not make any sense to me. So I guess I'm just gonna kind of sit it here. I'm assuming maybe it wedges itself somewhere up under here to hook on the actual perch mount. All right, now we're assembling the air springs. We need to take both of these brackets right here, the radius or rounded edge. They will both face inward according to the diagram here. You guys can see there. They're both facing the same direction. Take 2 carriage bolts, put them on the innermost hole on the bracket, which is this here. So we do that, just like we match it in here. And then we have to install our lower bracket and roll plate for each air spring using the smaller bolts and nuts. So let me go ahead and grab that stuff. All right, you guys, this little area kind of stumped me for a second, but it's really easy. So we have the 2 brackets, okay? 2 flat brackets. Make sure both 45-degree cuts are facing toward the left, all right? Now you need to take a carriage bolt and then we'll go through the innermost square hole. All right, so for an example, I'm going to take this one out. If you guys flip the plates over, you guys see these holes are chamfered, they're beveled. They're not. That's because they're going to use the 3/8 by 24 by 3/4 inch flat socket screws. Those are going to sit flush through the bracket like that, all right? Now, obviously, this bracket's going to be inverted, facing toward the ground. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and install 2 of these screws in the innermost holes, meaning these 2 inner ones, okay? So let's go ahead, grab 2 screws, I'm gonna try to do this one-handed here for you guys. Look at that, just good, ask your mom. All right, so in the roll plate, the rounded edge will be toward the air spring, okay? So that's going to sit like that. Now the airbags, the tag goes down, and those two bolts will screw into those two black bolts we just sit on the bottom, okay? So let's go ahead and tighten those real quick. All right, you guys, next step, we need to go ahead and put our top roll plate on, okay? They literally just slide on, all like that. Take our other bag, other roll plate, like that. These fittings get tightened down just a little bit. And again, these are a swivel. It doesn't matter how much you tighten them, just get them snug so they do not leak. All right, you guys, so up to this point, this is what your bracket should look like. You have your bottom plate, your two socket screws, your carriage bolt that you installed before you put the airbag on, because obviously you can't get that in. All right, so flipping it back upright, we have the airbag, we have our top roll plate, our top bracket, our air fitting, our bolts, lock washers, flat washers in the bracket, all tightened down. Same thing on this side. And then, so those are two brackets prepped for the next step, and let's see what that is. Make sure the fitting is less than 7/8 in height. We have our handy dandy little measuring device. You guys can see we are way less than 7/8. So we're all good to go. Let's go ahead and check the other one here while we're here. Let's go ahead, check that one as well. Less than 7/8 of an inch. All right, we need to go ahead and unload the suspension, or AKA jack the back of the truck up by the hitch. We basically need to take the back of the truck and lift it up, unload, unlift the suspension, place the assembly on the lower strike bracket, or strike plate, AKA, which is the top of the bump stop where it touches the axle tube. That's the strike plate. Fittings toward the outside of the wheel, okay, facing the outside of the vehicle, which is this way. We have our two carriage bolts, so we have a left and a right. Obviously, you guys can dictate which one it is, okay? And then we're gonna go ahead and insert the two carriage bolts on the rear square holes that align, okay? And we need to go ahead and line up with the forward C bracket that we had dropped on the axle earlier. So that's going to align there. All right, you guys, to unload the suspension, I have my biggest jack and the ball and the load is sitting on the drop hitch. I have it all the way up as far as the jack will go, plenty of room. Compress the bags, get them in here, okay? You have your front view of the bracket, which will point forward, and then the back will be this guy right here, the carriage bolt we installed earlier. That'll be at the back of both sides, okay? Now, remember how we had that C bracket earlier that really didn't make sense? Well, if you guys are putting two to two together, this slot here with that little lip, that's going to bite in like that. And when we tighten it, it's going to put pressure against here on that little spring perch there. So we're gonna go ahead and put a bolt through that, a carriage bolt there. This bolt is going to get wedged up in there. You guys get the idea. I can't really do this one-handed, okay? The same thing on the passenger side, okay? There's a front view for you. That'll get locked in that little slip, and then we'll use a nut and a bolt to hold that. The flange nuts, these are going to be a 9/16. You guys can see we'll need to put two on the back carriage bolts and then one on the front carriage bolt we installed earlier. And then we're gonna have to go ahead and install the upper U bolts, which is going to be easy. They slide over the frame, we'll put the nuts on, whatnot. All right, you guys, you have two carriage bolts that go in the back, okay? You have the one we installed earlier. You need to go ahead and put one in the outermost hole, all right? Coming around to the front, you guys need to put one in the front of this bracket, okay? Those C brackets you guys saw earlier, they get wedged. These two plates intertwine with each other. Put a hex bolt and put a nut. Same thing on this side. You guys can probably see it a little bit earlier, how that bracket sits in there with that little cutout groove. Put a nut, okay? I need to go ahead and put another carriage bolt on this side, which I have one here. So demonstration, we'll go ahead, put it on the outermost hole, all right? That lines it up. Now we need these little U brackets, L brackets. See how they have this little notch? Same thing, they're going to sit in that hole on both sides. Easy to show you in this one, all right? So This is going to lock in like that, obviously with the bolts going through the hole, but you guys get the idea. Same thing on the other side. All right, everything's still loose, everything's just hand tight. You guys can see where those tabs earlier to space out the brackets for the brake lines, how they're working out, okay? We might have to come in and finesse this a little bit more. We'll do that when we're done, don't worry about it. This side, you guys can see, it's pretty close, but it doesn't touch. Again, everything's still loose. Then we need to go ahead and lower the vehicle. We're gonna probably have one bolt that goes through here to the frame, if I'd imagine, and then we have two U-bolts that come off the frame and come down and protrude into these up here. And we'll have two of those per side. The frame, place U-bolts over the frame. Got two of those. That's pictured on both sides, as you guys can see, all right? Lower the vehicle while inserting the threaded portions of the U-bolts through the corresponding holes. On the upper brackets, you guys can see here, that we'll be using more flange nuts to tighten those guys down. Adjust the upper brackets needed to vertically align the rear air spring with the frame. Close as perpendicular as possible. Torque to 16 ugga-duggas. For the trucks that have fifth wheel brackets alongside the frame rail, we do not have that, so we're going to be ignoring that. We're going to be just looking at these two steps here. Basically, slide the U-bolts over the frame, lower the suspension, align it with the top bracket, put our nuts on, tighten them to 16 foot ugga-duggas. All right, you guys can see passenger right rear tire. There is this little wiring harness. You guys need to just slide the U-bolt between that and the inner part of the frame. Same thing with the front one. You guys can see we need to line up with these holes down here, okay? It's hard to see with the contrast. It's dark in here. Going to the driver's side rear. These should just slide right over the frame, no problem. Again, to connect to these corresponding holes, we're going to lower the suspension or raise the vehicle, whatever the case may be. That's why I use ramps and then floor jacks acting like a machine to lift and lower the axle. All right, you guys, just to go to show, you don't have to have a fancy garage with the lift or a shop. Just a driveway, a floor jack, and some ramps. You guys can do what I do, obviously. All right, you guys can see those lined up, no problem. Again, I'm doing this one-handed, one-man show, everything, so those lined up as well. All right, let's go ahead and put our nuts on the bottom. All right, you guys, using the jack, I lifted up the truck a little bit once again just to get the slack off the U-bolt so that we're not touching the plates up here. And it looks like we're going to probably have to use some of those self-tapping bolts that came with to align into there, I'm assuming. We'll double check that, but then here's the other side as well. And again, these are the 5000 Ultimates with, again, the built-in bump stops / joints bouncer. So you guys can run these with no PSI. And again, this will act as your new bump stop and obviously act as your airbag. But even with no air pressure here, you guys will have a nice ride. All right, you guys, the holes you saw on the upper bracket, that's if you guys have a fifth wheel hitch in the back of your truck. You have to drill 2 5/16 holes and use these self-threading / self-cutting bolts to go up to the top of the frame. We're not going to be using those, so put those to the side. But if you guys have that fifth wheel, follow the instructions. All right. Now we need to go ahead, reattaching the wire guards. The holes are slightly misaligned with threaded on the axle. File or die grind the holes. Basically elongate them is what it's saying if they do not line up. Okay. Attach the harness guards to the axle using previously removed hardware. You guys can see here that diagram it's talking about to trim that how they did. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a Sharpie and I'll go back and I'll take this to file those and we'll hit those with some black spray paint. Then you guys can install the air lines and then it tells you where to locate them if you guys are using that particular kit. But we're gonna be running a hard line, which is this, all the way back to the back of the truck from the air compressor, okay? All right, you guys, we need to go ahead and tighten all of our hardware down. We're gonna start with the bottom brackets. These are 14 / 9/16 millimeter sockets. These get tightened ugga-dugga to 16 foot-pounds, okay? Same thing with the nuts up here for the U-bolts. Those are 16 foot-pounds as well. All right, and with these, you're probably going to have to use a adjustable wrench because you guys can see there's not much room to get up in here. You guys, another late night, but it's going to get done. We're about 10 minutes away from completing this customer's vehicle. Went ahead and I ran the air hose through the same wiring harness. Yeah, I'm a freaking wreck. Ran the air hose through the same wiring harness that I made for the air compressor. I did that off camera. You guys get the idea. It came up through the same hole. Yeah, I should have did this to begin with, but I didn't know where I was going to mount the compressor. Yeah, it's kind of working backwards, but anyways, ran it through the same grommet, through the same loom, got it zip tied. I got to finish running this. I've already got it running across that footwell. Give you guys a quick recap. Put the bags on, ran her line all the way up, ran it down the frame rail. Last thing I wanted to notate for you guys is I went ahead and put some wire loom on the customer's brake lines all the way around. That was not necessary. I did bend the lines away from the brackets, you guys can see, but I just wanted an extra layer of protection. And I put that retaining clip back down here. I did not want to grind or cut anything on the customer's truck. I did not have to elongate the holes, enlarge them, slot them, whatever you want to call it. You guys can see all the factory bolts are in. Even this guy here, you can see it rides up here like a you know what, but this side was a pain in the butt. What I did was I took a ratchet strap, went around the end to pull it inward like this. And while I had some tension on it, used my palm, knocked it up, and I got all the bolts in, no problem. Go to the other side, wire loom this back piece. All the bolts are in. Got all the clips in. There we go. And again, got a wire ran all the way up here. I still got to zip tie that. Damn it. Yeah, I got to zip tie that one wire, and then I'll put a piece of loom on this. But other than that, wire runs all the way up. And she's completely done. Here. Let's get the camera to focus. Yep, we're holding 50 PSI. Then we have the controller mounted down here, all wire loomed. And I'll come back to you guys in the morning. Guys, it's been about a week. The customer hasn't came back with any complaints or leaks. So far, everything's going really well, and they're satisfied. You guys can see, there are the brackets there. We ran the air hose through the frame. On this side, ran the hose through the back of the truck, through the frame rail as well. Here's the compressor. We have all that mounted. Let me go ahead and put you in the wide lens. You guys can see all that's mounted, a wire loomed everything. Now that hose up front there has a good bit of slack because those three-way splitters, they like to have straight hoses that aren't on a tight bend or radius. So to prevent it from leaking, I had to keep it with a little extra slack, and if we ever need to cut it back, we have that accessibility as well. So I ran the hose and everything up over the frame rail, down the down the passenger side rear, and you guys can see how I have it. Let me get the camera up in here. You guys can see everything's still tight, looks good. And then if we come up here, you guys can see right up there is where I have the T-fitting, okay? You guys see that right up there? That's where I have the T-fitting, or the three-way splitter, to split the bags together, and then we have the feed coming in or going to the compressor. And then I just simply use some self-tapping screws, and I put it along the bottom bed rail to hold that all the way across. Nice, clean, professional. Again, wire loomed. And there was really no way to run it up over the spare tire and come back around. Plus, it's just a waste of material and time. So again, we got all that done, and then the hose just sticks right up there. All right, you guys, well, that's a wrap to the install of installing airbags on a 2023 GMC 1500 Duramax. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to leave a like, comment down below, subscribe, click the notification bell, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.